Have you ever had a moment when everything seemed to be going exactly as planned, and then suddenly it didn't? You worked hard for the promotion, but someone else got it. You prepared for the opportunity, but it disappeared. You loved someone, but the relationship ended. You saved money, but an unexpected expense took it away. You made plans for your future, only to discover that life had completely different plans for you. And perhaps the hardest part isn't what happened. It's the question that comes afterward. Why is this happening to me? When life doesn't go your way, staying positive can feel almost impossible. People often tell us, just stay positive. But what does that actually mean? Does it mean pretending you're not disappointed? Does it mean smiling when you're hurting? Does it mean convincing yourself that everything is fine when everything feels completely wrong? No. Real positivity is something much deeper. It isn't about denying reality. It is about learning how to face reality without allowing it to destroy your hope. And today, I want to tell you a story about someone who learned this lesson the hard way. A story about failure, disappointment, uncertainty, and eventually a completely different way of seeing life. Because sometimes, the thing that feels like the end of your story is actually the beginning of a better chapter. Daniel was 34 years old. He lived in a quiet European city, worked for a technology company, and had spent almost 10 years building his career. From the outside, his life looked successful. He had a comfortable apartment, a stable job, a small circle of good friends, and a plan for the future. Daniel wasn't rich, but he was comfortable. And more importantly, he believed he knew where his life was going. He had recently applied for a management position at his company. He had worked toward it for years. Late nights, extra responsibilities, difficult projects, weekend presentations. He believed he was ready. When the interview arrived, he walked into the room confident. He answered every question. He talked about his experience. He explained his ideas. And when he walked out, he thought, this is my moment. For the next 2 weeks, Daniel imagined his future, a bigger salary, a better apartment, more responsibility, maybe even buying a house. Then the email arrived. He opened it and read the first sentence. Thank you for your time and effort. He already knew. He didn't get the position. Someone else did. Daniel stared at the screen for several minutes. He felt disappointed, but he told himself, it's okay. I'll get another opportunity. And then something else happened. Suddenly, the career he had spent 10 years building was gone. He went home that evening and sat alone in his apartment. For the first time in years, he didn't know what he was going to do next. And then the negative thoughts started. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I wasted 10 years. What if I can't find another job? What if my best years are already behind me? One disappointment became another, and another. Soon, Daniel wasn't just dealing with unemployment. He was fighting a battle inside his own mind. A few days later, Daniel met an old friend named Michael at a small cafe. Michael listened quietly while Daniel explained everything. When Daniel finished, he said, I don't know what to do anymore. Michael didn't immediately give him advice. Instead, he asked a simple question. What happened? Daniel explained again. I lost my job. Michael nodded. That's true. Daniel looked confused. That's all you have to say? Michael smiled. No, but there's something important here. He pointed toward Daniel. You lost your job. Then he pointed toward Daniel's head. But you've also started telling yourself a story about what losing your job means. Daniel remained silent. Michael continued. You lost a position. That is a fact. But saying I'm a failure is an interpretation. Saying my future is ruined is a prediction. Saying I'll never recover is a fear. Daniel thought about it, and for the first time, he realized something. He wasn't suffering only because of what happened. He was suffering because of the meaning he had attached to what happened. This is one of the most important lessons about staying positive. You cannot always control what happens to you, but you can gradually learn to control the meaning you give to what happens. Life will disappoint you. People will reject you. Plans will fail. Money will disappear. Opportunities will be missed. Sometimes you will do everything right and still lose. That's life. But the event itself is only part of the story. The other part is the story you tell yourself afterward. Daniel tried something different. Instead of forcing himself to say, everything is wonderful, he started saying something more honest. This is difficult, but I don't know how the story ends yet. That sentence changed something, because it allowed him to acknowledge the pain without surrendering his future. This is what genuine positivity looks like. You don't have to say, I love this situation. You can say, I don't like this situation, but I can handle the next step. You don't have to say, everything will definitely work out. You can say, I don't know what will happen, but I won't give up today. You don't have to pretend you're fearless. You simply have to refuse to let fear make every decision for you. There is a huge difference between optimism and denial. Denial says, nothing is wrong. For several weeks, Daniel kept asking, why me? Why did I lose my job? Why didn't I get the promotion? Why did everything happen at the same time? Eventually, he changed the question. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? He started asking, what can this teach me? The situation didn't change, but his relationship with the situation changed. Maybe losing his job could teach him that his identity shouldn't depend entirely on his career. Maybe the failed promotion could teach him that there were skills he still needed to develop. Maybe the uncertainty could teach him how to live without having every answer. And maybe this difficult period could push him toward a life he would never have considered otherwise. This doesn't mean every painful experience has some magical purpose. Some things are simply painful. Some losses don't immediately make sense. But asking constructive questions gives your mind somewhere useful to go. Instead of, why is my life falling apart? Try, what is the next useful thing I can do? Instead of, why am I behind everyone else? Try, what direction do I want to move in now? Instead of, why did they reject me? Try, what can I improve before the next opportunity? Questions shape attention, and attention shapes behavior. One evening, Daniel opened social media. He saw an old classmate celebrating a promotion. Another friend had purchased a house. Someone else was traveling through Italy. Another person announced their engagement. Daniel looked at his own life, and suddenly he felt even worse. He thought, everyone is moving forward except me. But then he remembered something. He was comparing his private struggle to other people's public highlights. He didn't know their financial problems. He didn't know their relationship problems. He didn't know their fears. He didn't know how many nights they spent wondering whether they were good enough. Social media often shows outcomes. It rarely shows uncertainty. And this creates a dangerous illusion. Everyone else is winning. Everyone else is happy. Everyone else has figured life out. Everyone has invisible battles. Everyone has moments they don't post. Everyone experiences uncertainty. Everyone experiences aging, loss, disappointment, and fear. So don't measure your life against someone else's highlight reel. Your journey has its own timing. You are not late simply because someone else arrived earlier. A tree doesn't become a failure because another tree grows faster. Different lives have different seasons. After a month without a job, Daniel realized that waiting for one giant breakthrough was making him miserable, so he changed his goal. He stopped trying to fix his life. Instead, he created small daily goals. Wake up at 7. Exercise for 30 minutes. Apply for 3 jobs. Spend 1 hour learning. Read 10 pages. Cook dinner. Call a friend. And at the end of each day, he asked, did I move forward today? Sometimes the answer was yes. Sometimes it was barely, but it was enough. This is something many people underestimate. Progress doesn't always feel dramatic. Sometimes progress looks like getting out of bed when you're discouraged. Sometimes it looks like trying again after rejection. Sometimes it looks like saving a small amount of money. Sometimes it looks like saying no to something that isn't good for you. Sometimes it looks like choosing to rest instead of giving up. Small wins create momentum, and momentum creates confidence. You don't build confidence by constantly telling yourself you're amazing. You build confidence by repeatedly proving to yourself, I can take the next step. One of Daniel's biggest problems was that he wanted certainty. He wanted to know, when would he get a job? How much would he earn? Where would he live? What would happen next year? And neither does yours. You can plan. You can make responsible decisions, but you cannot eliminate uncertainty. Eventually, Daniel learned something surprisingly freeing. You don't need to know the entire path to take the next step. Think about driving at night. Your headlights don't illuminate the entire road. They illuminate only a portion of it. But that's enough. You drive through the visible section, then the next section appears, then another. Life works the same way. You don't need to see the next 10 years. You need to see the next few meters, then reassess, then take another. During difficult periods, what you consume matters. Daniel noticed that every morning he would check bad news, financial worries, social media arguments, and negative comments. Then he wondered why he felt anxious. So he changed his routine. For the first hour of the day, no social media, no unnecessary news, no comparison. Instead, he walked outside. He listened to something educational. He wrote down 3 things he was grateful for. Then he worked on his goals. This doesn't mean ignoring the world. It means being intentional about what you allow into your mind. Your attention is valuable. If you constantly feed your mind fear, outrage, comparison, and negativity, don't be surprised when your thoughts become negative. Protecting your mind isn't weakness. It's maintenance. Just as you wouldn't put dirty fuel into your car and expect perfect performance, you shouldn't constantly feed your mind negativity and expect peace. One evening, Daniel wrote down 3 things he still had, not things he wanted, things he already had. His health, a friend who cared about him, a warm place to sleep. The list grew. He realized something. Losing one thing had made him temporarily blind to everything else. Gratitude didn't erase his problems, but it stopped his problems from becoming the only thing he could see. And that's what gratitude can do. It shifts your attention from what is missing to what is still here. Maybe you don't have the career you want, but perhaps you still have skills. Maybe your relationship ended, but perhaps you still have people who love you. Maybe money is tight, but perhaps there are still choices you can make. Maybe your plans changed, but perhaps you still have time to create new ones. Gratitude isn't about pretending you have everything. It's about recognizing that even during difficult seasons, your life may still contain valuable things. 6 months after losing his job, Daniel had received dozens of rejection emails. At first, each one hurt. Eventually, he started seeing them differently. A rejection didn't necessarily mean you aren't good enough. It often meant you weren't the right match for this particular opportunity. That distinction matters. One company rejecting you doesn't define your professional value. One person rejecting you doesn't define your worth. One failed business doesn't define your ability. One mistake doesn't define your character. One bad year doesn't define your entire life. A rejection is information. Sometimes painful information, but still information. Use it. Improve. Adjust. Continue. One morning, Daniel received an email. A small company wanted to interview him. It wasn't the prestigious position he originally wanted. The salary wasn't dramatically higher. The office wasn't impressive. But something about the company interested him. They were building educational technology for young people. Daniel had always enjoyed teaching and mentoring, but he had never considered turning that interest into part of his career. During the interview, he talked honestly about his experience. He talked about what he had learned. He talked about his failures. And instead of trying to appear perfect, he simply showed who he was. A few days later, he received an offer. Daniel accepted, but something surprising happened. He eventually realized that getting this job wasn't the biggest victory. The biggest victory was who he had become while searching for it. He was more patient, more adaptable, less dependent on external approval, more comfortable with uncertainty, and more aware of what actually mattered to him. He had thought losing his old job had destroyed his future. Instead, it had forced him to reconsider what kind of future he actually wanted. Maybe you're currently experiencing your own version of Daniel's story. Maybe you lost a job. Maybe you're struggling financially. Maybe your business isn't working. Maybe you're studying hard but not getting the results you expected. Maybe someone you loved walked away. Maybe you're watching people around you succeed while you feel stuck. If that's you, remember this. Your current situation is not necessarily your final destination. A difficult chapter is still only a chapter. You don't know what the next one will contain. The mistake we often make is judging the entire book based on one difficult page. Imagine reading a novel where the main character loses everything halfway through. You wouldn't immediately close the book and say, this character's life is over. You would keep reading because you know there are more pages. Your life is the same. You are still writing. So when life doesn't go your way, remember 5 simple rules. Rule number 1, feel what you feel. You don't have to be positive every second. Sadness is not failure. Disappointment is not weakness. Give yourself permission to feel. Then give yourself permission to move forward. Rule number 2, separate facts from fears. What actually happened, and what are you imagining might happen? Don't let a fear about tomorrow become a fact about today. Rule number 3, focus on what you can control. Don't spend all your energy fighting things you cannot change. Ask, what can I do today? Then do it. Rule number 4, look for the next step, not the entire staircase. You don't need every answer. You need the next useful action. Rule number 5, don't confuse a difficult season with a ruined life. Bad days happen. Bad months happen. Sometimes even bad years happen. But life is bigger than one season. Years later, Daniel sometimes Thought about that evening when he sat alone in his apartment after losing his job. Back then, he thought his life was falling apart. Today, he understood something he couldn't see at the time. Sometimes life removes something from your hands, not because you are being punished, but because you may eventually discover that you were holding on to something that no longer belonged in your future. Of course, not every loss immediately leads to something better, and not every disappointment has a beautiful explanation. But you don't need to know why everything happened. You simply need to decide what you will do next. So if life isn't going according to your plan right now, take a breath. You are allowed to be disappointed. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to say, "This is hard." But don't say, "This is the end," because you don't know that. You haven't seen the next chapter. You haven't met all the people you're going to meet. You haven't experienced all the opportunities that are still ahead. You haven't discovered all the strengths that difficult seasons can reveal. And you haven't become the person you're capable of becoming. So keep going. Take one small step, then another. Protect your mind. Choose your questions carefully. Focus on what you can control. Be grateful for what remains. Learn from what happened. And give the future a chance to surprise you. Because staying positive doesn't mean believing that life will always go your way. It means believing that even when life doesn't go your way, you can still choose your way forward. And sometimes, that's where your real strength begins. Your story isn't over. Keep turning the page.